I accidentally called my ice-cold boss baby. She said, "Say that again." The entire office went silent. Rowan Mercer stood frozen beside the CEO's desk, coffee dripping from his shirt and his heart pounding against his ribs. He had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He looked directly at Celine Arkwright, the most feared woman at Alderstone Group, and whispered, "Sorry, baby." Someone dropped a pen. Another employee stopped breathing. Celine slowly lifted her eyes from the document in front of her. Her expression was unreadable. Then she leaned back in her chair. "Say that again." Rowan's blood turned cold. 3 months earlier, he had promised himself he would survive his first year at Alderstone without making a single mistake. He needed the salary desperately. His grandmother, the woman who had raised him after his father's death, was seriously ill. Every paycheck went toward hospital bills, medication, and keeping their tiny apartment. That morning, he'd spent the night beside her hospital bed. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. And when he arrived at work, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. He was distracted, exhausted, and terrified. Then Celine appeared. The CEO walked through the lobby like everyone belonged to her world, and she was merely allowing them to exist in it. Nobody spoke around her. Nobody joked. Nobody even looked directly at her. And somehow, Rowan had just called her baby. I apologize," he stammered. "I didn't mean... Why did you say it?" "I don't know." Celine stared at him. "That's not an answer." Rowan swallowed hard. "My grandmother is sick. I was talking to her last night and I must have..." "Enough." He expected security. Instead, Celine simply stood. "Go back to work." The entire office exhaled. Rowan didn't understand. Neither did anyone else. But that wasn't the strangest part. The next morning, Rowan found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a hospital receipt. His grandmother's most expensive treatment had been paid in full. No name, no signature. Just one sentence. Some debts should never become burdens. Rowan stared at the barrier. He immediately thought of Celine. But he couldn't prove anything. Then things became even stranger. Celine began assigning him confidential projects. She started appearing beside his desk without warning. She corrected his mistakes personally. And sometimes, when she thought nobody was watching, Rowan caught her staring at him with an expression that looked almost like fear. One night, Rowan stayed late. The building was nearly empty when he heard something behind Celine's office door. A crash. Then silence. He knocked. No answer. He opened the door. Celine was standing beside her desk, staring at a broken picture frame. Inside the frame was a photograph of a young man. Rowan recognized him immediately. The man had been Celine's fiancé. But according to an old newspaper article, he had died years ago while rescuing children from a burning apartment building. Celine quickly picked up the photograph. "You shouldn't be here. I heard something break. I said leave." Her voice cracked. Only once. But Rowan heard it, and then he noticed something terrifying. There were fresh tears on her face. The woman everyone called heartless was crying. Rowan quietly stepped back. "I won't tell anyone." Celine looked at him. "Why?" "Because some pain doesn't belong to the whole world." She stared at him for several seconds, then she whispered, "That's exactly what he used to say." From that night forward, everything changed. Celine became less distant. Not warm, not yet, but human. She remembered Rowan's grandmother's appointments. She quietly adjusted his schedule. She left tea on his desk during overnight shifts, but Rowan still couldn't understand why she was doing so much. Until Christmas Eve. His grandmother suddenly suffered cardiac arrest. Rowan rushed to the hospital. He sat outside the emergency room, shaking, convinced he was about to lose the only family he had left. Then someone sat beside him. Celine. She wasn't dressed like a CEO. No designer coat, no security. Just a woman holding 2 cups of tea. "I didn't know who else to call," Rowan whispered. Celine looked at him. "You didn't call me?" I know. I came anyway. For the first time, Rowan saw tears forming in her eyes. Then she finally confessed the truth. The anonymous payments had been hers. The schedule changes had been hers. The hospital bills she'd quietly covered had been hers. But why? Rowan asked. Celine looked down. Because when you called me baby that morning. She stopped. That was the last word Elias called me before he died. Rowan said nothing. He used to call me that when I was afraid. I hated hearing it from anyone else. She looked directly into his eyes. But when you said it, I remembered who I was before I lost him. The emergency room doors suddenly opened. A doctor stepped out. She's stable. Rowan covered his face and began to cry. Celine quietly placed a hand on his shoulder, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to smile. Months later, Alderstone held its first employee celebration in a decade. Celine stood before hundreds of employees. She spoke about grief, about kindness, about how one careless word can sometimes reach a place that years of silence never could. Then she looked across the room at Rowan. I once believed walls protected us from pain, she said. Her voice trembled. I was wrong. The room erupted in applause. Rowan smiled. And years later, whenever someone asked him how he survived working for the ice-cold CEO, he always gave the same answer. Sometimes the person who looks the coldest is simply someone waiting for a reason to feel warm again. And somehow, it all began with one embarrassing mistake, one accidental word, and a woman who whispered, "Say that again."